If there's anything I'm terrified of, it would be getting haunted by a dead relative at night when I least expected it. That's one. And then the second thing I'm also scared of is, I don't know, making contact with an automatic weapon? Well, my guest today on Open Loops has done both of those things. He is Dean McMurray, the military medium. Get ready to crap your pants in fear, or stand up and fight for your country and talk to the afterlife. Those are your two choices. Be all that you can be, here and the hereafter. It's Open Loops time. I consider it an affront to my family that you haven't heard about Anchor. It's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain, okay? Let me just lay this out for you. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. And get this, okay? Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money, moolah, from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hey there, welcome to Open Loops Conversations That Bend, a theme park for your intellect and imagination. That's right. She's intellect, he's imagination. They meet, they get a funnel cake, they smooch on the tunnel of love, they ride the Ferris wheel, and then they get another funnel cake. Because that's the kind of show you're at. I'm Greg Bornstein, your curator of experience, chief looper, and really, yes, this is an episode that explores the very things that I love. We're talking hardcore, on-the-ground American institutions, the Army, exploring what that does and the psychology of that. But then we're also exploring the afterlife. And Dean McMurray brought both of those worlds together. There's a little touch of UFOs, and I'm very excited to share this interview with you. He was fantastic. If you like Open Loops, hey, please go to iTunes, subscribe, rate, leave a review. I'd love your feedback. Feel free to also email Greg at open-loops.com with suggestions and people that you'd like to have me have on the show, topics that you'd like me to have cover. In the meanwhile, enjoy Dean McMurray. He was a fantastic guest, and I really enjoyed our conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Dean McMurray, the military medium, here on Open Loops. Dean, thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, Greg, thanks so much for having me on. It's really a pleasure being on your show.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, here's where I want to start off. I find it always interesting the way people brand themselves as like psychics. Like there's the Long Island medium,
right?
And the military medium. I mean, I'm sort of curious. Like, could you have just been like Dean McMurray medium, or did you have to like? What was the process of being like, we're going with this brand?
Right. Well, it starts conjuring images, right? And it's like, how did you come up with that, or what does that mean? And great question. Originally when I first started doing this full time, my wife said to me, you should go with the military medium, meaning, 24 years of your adult life has been spent in the military, and you connect to military people deeper, and that's a big part of your life. Why don't you, have that in your tagline, so to speak? And so if you ever talk to a veteran, sometimes that stuff sounds corny at some, different parts of
Right.
it. And at the time I said, and I'll just be blatant, I said, no, that sounds stupid. I don't want to do that. And that's what I really said. And she,
Yeah.
of course, my wife, I love her with all my heart. She just probably rolled her eyes and goes, whatever, like you're not listening.
Uh,
But
uh,
and then I kind of went with the, just psychic medium Dean McMurray for many, many years. And that's who I was. It was interesting though, Greg, because it came to a point where it's like, I need to rebrand myself. Like, I know I'm a psychic medium, but what makes me unique? Like, we all give messages and we all do it uniquely. And I was like, well, my background, like, because I had been in the military so long and I connect with the families and the soldiers themselves and all that great stuff. So I, there was probably
yeah.
a little, like, I told you so, but went back to my wife's advice of owning the aspect or the label, I'll call it, of the military medium. And what was so crazy is when I did that, it opened up a whole new set of doors, meaning more males in the demographic of meaning clients and just people in general coming up and going, hey, that's really cool. I love the military aspect of that because they could relate, right? And not just males, but females. But it seemed to open a whole new paradigm. And I was blown
Yeah.
away because I thought, well, they could, they could pick up through conversation that, that I'm, prior service military. But that wasn't the case. I had to have it in the label, evidently. And of course, my wife lovingly said, I told you so. And
Yeah.
that's kind of how it came to be and really embraced. And it's really taken on a life of its own. It's morphed into different things beyond that. But yeah, that's in a sense, I wasn't doing Project Stargate. I wasn't because I know a lot. Oh my
Yeah. Oh, I
God, he was
definitely want to
working
ask
as
about
a
all that.
medium. Yeah, I know a lot of people are thinking, oh my God, he was working as a medium for in the basement of the Pentagon. What was he doing? No, 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 no. Maybe not as
Is there any truth to that, Gene? Like, I mean, being in the military,
sure, sure. Well, I'll say
you must have
this. I'll
access.
say this as far as my knowledge when it comes to what I did in the military. I was just a very basic, what I would call a very basic soldier. Didn't do anything extraordinary. So as far as the knowledge that came from the military, was it there? No. But what I will say is this: do I believe now? You know, do I believe that they have some stuff going on? Oh, you bet. Yeah, we could get in a whole discussion about that. But do I? Yeah, I do
We
believe
might
that
have
there
to.
are. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
You're on open loops. That's what happens on this show.
Right.
But yes, keep going.
Yeah, right. There's a rabbit hole. It's like, whoops. But yeah, and so the thing is that as far as talking about special projects, I know that I chatted with a guy one time that his claim was that he worked for the military as a, how do you want to call it? Kind of in that aspect, but I don't think was Project Stargate. And there was some other folks that came snooping around as well, as far as folks from Hollywood as well that had been, they were looking for a concept along that lines, and they were doing a lot of, I'll just say, like sleuthing or vetting out projects. And, they were like, oh, you're the military medium, like, and so they were curious what all that meant. And I was like, I said, not to put myself down in any way, but I said, I'm not the only guy that's been in the military that's a medium. There's a lot of people out there. However, I'm the only guy that owns the label per se on the web.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. No, I mean, you know what? This is so, you would think if, you know, I mean, look, and I'm sure you've been tossed everything, like everything from, what are the winning lottery numbers? That's like,
Sure.
I feel like everybody that deals
Mm-hmm.
with
Mm-hmm.
says they're, you always get that stuff. But I also do wonder, like, if they were spending all this time doing research,
Right.
why aren't there appointed generals that are solely like seers of future events to protect the nation?
Right.
Like, is that something? I mean, have you heard whispers of something like that? Like,
Well, I haven't heard whispers of it, because if there's, or, well, I should say those organizations are kept levels below even being in the, even in the know, right? Like people knowing that
right,
stuff. But so super top secret, whatever level that is classified at. But the thing that I'll share is that, I really do believe at a personal level that there, and I know this for a fact because of serving, that there's a lot of things that go on that other people have no clue what happens. I know that there's stuff that I did personally. And like I said, I felt that I was just a basic soldier, that there's a lot of civilians that had no clue that it went on. I know that there's a lot of things that went on in the military that I didn't know all the details because guess what? Didn't have the need to know, right? The need,
mm,
classified, label. You don't have a need to know, therefore it doesn't matter, and move out, right? so, but
yeah,
but the thing going back to that is, I do believe, um, that there are organizations out there, that are either, part of the government organization or maybe like a bigger, if you want to call it a world order or whatever they are,
mm,
existing out there. And I can tell you, the reason that I believe that to be a fact is because I have since, after stepping into my mediumship abilities, I did some remote viewing and kind of other sleuthing for some businesses that felt that the government was meddling in their business. So almost like reverse corporate surveillance, we'll call it. And
interesting.
yeah, and where the government was really interested, in what they were doing and what they were developing. And it wasn't any top secret, like weapon or anything, but it was more along the lines of holistic healing and what implications that has. But the other thing is like, is it a threat to certain pieces, because they have their fingers in everything, right? And
Yes, yes.
so trying to control, and we're not just talking about a military aspect, we're talking about levels way beyond the military. This is, so kind of interesting stuff. And yeah, and it was mind blowing because the session that I did, I was like, God, how do I, it was early on, and when I was doing some remote viewing, and I was like, geez, how do you, because I wasn't connected to any remote viewing group or controller or whatever terms you want to
Yeah.
use. And I actually it was validated later by some students and then somebody else talking about a army fort that I had never heard of. And it's still in existence. They're still using it. And it's actually where the Army tests nuclear biological chemicals, or NBC, agents. And it was in a remote training area, and looked like an old barn. And that was the premise. It was like, oh my God, I was there. And of course, levels below that. But I was like, it was really cool. So just
Yeah,
kind of
that
one.
is, you know
Yeah.
what? I am so curious because, at least, Dean, I'll full disclosure with you. Like, I come from a magic background as
Okay.
I'm a magician,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore I have a lot of like, I read a lot of James Randi books growing up,
Sure.
and a lot of debunkers.
Mm-hmm.
And you get an idea of like everybody doing a remote viewing workshop is
Yeah.
like promising false hopes and da 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 da. So
Yeah.
first of all, like, so I can have a better understanding.
Right.
Like when you are doing remote viewing,
Right.
what exactly, like, are you in a room? Like, what exactly does remote viewing actually look
Right.
like? Could you paint the picture a little bit?
So, so it involves a chicken, and no, I'm just kidding. I'm messing with you, Grace.
I love
No, I'm messing with you. But to be really honest, I'm just in my home. I keep it really simple, and but the main thing is for me is to get quiet. Whether I might have some light music on, I might have headphones on. And does it help to, of course, images start popping up of people of being in these fluid filled chambers and whether they're, in a salt tank or something. I've
Right.
had some cool experiences in salt tanks or like at a spa or something, but I don't have anything like that in my home. And so really it's just getting comfortable to allow myself to energetically project to the target area. And sometimes I don't even know. So for example, for that corporate surveillance, we'll just call it the case that the client wanted me to check out. And it was really hard for me. I got to share this because I didn't study remote viewing. I didn't go to a class. I tried to read, I think it is the military's book or the guy that teaches it. And it's at least 12 inches thick and it's so technical. And I was really quite bored with it, to be really honest. Nothing against that guy, but it wasn't for me. And I was like, well, I was kind of frustrated because I thought, wow, that would be a really cool ability to be able to harness. And it really happened by accident. But what I found is that it's not about, the construct is in the mind. And so regardless of what you're doing, a lot of us feel that, in order to, all of a sudden, you think you're going to play a tape, and in order to project your energies, you must be lying prone. No,
Right.
it's, that is because somebody told you that. It's, where are you comfortable? Where are you able? And maybe for some, they're able to get more details because of the visceral sensations are removed. They can't feel temperature differentiations.
Yeah.
They remove all the senses. So everything that, they experience is that much more vivid. I get that aspect, but, for me, it was just, kind of taking the cliche of the old school route and just finding somewhere quiet. And I've had experience sitting in, years ago, sitting in my lazy boy, for God's sakes. But where are you comfortable? Number one. And it's when I did the session for this client, the one that we're kind of referring to, I did it right here in my office, and it was, and I just kind of had a pen and paper with me, and I wasn't really sure how it was going to work because I thought, God, if I'm kind of in the moment and projecting, I don't want to say because I wasn't unconscious, can I, remain in that zone in a sense and then still write things down? And that was a concern that I had. But I was still able to do it because it was just notes. I would just like shorthand, right? And whether there were color sensations, a room, an experience watching somebody do something, if it was maybe an emotion or whatever, if somebody is trying to maybe manipulate maybe a serum or whatever the case is, then I just write that down in a sense in really short snippets. And then so when I went back to it, I go, and then I can write the details of exactly what I saw, and then report that. And kind of, I guess the military kind of trains you for that, because, you know, they always do the old school, I think the old school spot report, and talking about the number of maybe enemy soldiers, and you know, it's like all the details in a small, concise report. And basically that's what it is. But I was just doing it in a different way. And I kind of thought that you talk about those, you know, the debunkers, and I was like, you know, I was thinking, Greg, I was like, how do I, you know, I don't have any way of validating this. And I was like, but, you know, I was like, this isn't about me. This is for the client. And I need to let that aspect of consciousness go and trust that the information that I'm receiving is true and accurate. And I made it known, hey, you know, I haven't really done this much. And they were like, yeah, let's just see what you come up with. And the information that I came up with completely validated some other actual factual information that they had received. And they were like, the information that you got is exactly right on. We just need a validation. Thank you so much. And that was it. It was like, okay, you know, it was like, I don't need to know much more, but, you know, like, how much more do you need other than energetically standing in the room that they're doing experiments in? So,
well, I think that's what's so interesting about you, Dean, is that, you know, as I'm listening to you, and in the sense that I get from you is that, like, you definitely, there are some psychics out there that are a lot more, and I love them too, not necessarily for the right reasons, but there are a lot of psychics out there that I feel like are very much like into the showbiz aspect of it, a little more ego driven, a little more about, you know, come to this reading, and what I'm sensing with you is that I'm like, on one level, could this guy, even though you're, you know, you're a healer and you're an ordained minister, like, why isn't Dean just like a military veteran that was a really great therapist?
Right.
Like, why did it have to go in this direction? What is it that makes someone that's like very human, very intuitive, and also probably just has good wisdom, go to a place where they're like, no, I'm undeniably, I have something in addition to that, beyond like deep empathetic feelings. It's an interesting question. I wrestle with as I talk to different people in this
I
field.
appreciate that. And, you know, and I got to share, I was kind of laughing because a client told me, they were like, Dean, do you know who Mike Rowe is? You know, the old Dirty Jobs guy. And he has a few other shows. And I was like, oh yeah, I know Mike Rowe. And, you know, kind of people would resonate with him as a guy's guy or whatever. And they were like, yeah, you're kind of the Mike Rowe of mediums. And I was like, oh, I kind of digging that. And because it's not really fancy. And I don't want to say it's ghetto either. But at the same time, I understand as a business person that, you know, when you're doing readings, you know, number one, it's not about me. It never was. But the thing too is that it's all about the client, right? And it's about delivering the message that they need to hear at the time, not the one that they want, but the one that they need. You know, it's funny you bring up that where, you know, why wasn't Dean McMurray just this veteran that becomes a counselor? Really funny. Before I retired, I was in, you know, you know, back in the journey in the beginning years, I guess, was really the ending years of my military career, because I was when everything developed, I was in the last really 3 years of my military career. And the plan was, because I was retiring with 24 years in the military, and it was very natural for me to go, well, gosh, you know, 24 years in the military, you know, my kids are really young, you know, why not go continue in like some type of government work and kind of buy back all those military years, right? And so I was going to go work for the VA, whatever capacity that was, whether it's, I guess I didn't really at that time have planned to be a counselor, but I suppose the opportunity could have
Yeah,
been there.
right.
And I was going to work for the Veterans Administration. But then, of course, that didn't even come to pass because I ended up following my calling, I call it, to be in service as a medium, which if you would have asked me a long time ago before this, like, oh my God, no, why would I ever do that? And, it's like, certainly not doing it to get rich. It's certainly not it was something that was so undeniably huge. I couldn't ignore it. And it was, I knew that if I didn't do it, I would be completely miserable and I'd be off I call it now my life's path, right? Kind of like the bigger meaning in life. And I could be slogging away somewhere, but I knew that there would be a bigger part of me that wasn't being addressed. And
was there any part of you in childhood or growing up that even like ventured into these spiritual paths at all?
It's funny, Greg, because when I came out as a medium, when I came out of the quote unquote metaphysical closet, as it were, my mom was sitting there. I was really nervous. My dad was still alive at the time, and it was funny because he wasn't really sure how to take it, but yet dad was still supportive. God love him. And my mom goes, "Well, that makes so much sense." And I was like, "What do you mean that makes so much sense?" It was like, what, like, and she said, "You were always so sensitive as a boy." And I was like, "What?" And, it's like all these years that you forget in your childhood. And she was like, "Oh yeah, there were, that you had an imaginary friend, and, there was just, you had this knowledge about you and all this." And I was a very average student in school. I wasn't somebody that had this, I wouldn't put myself as a inner wisdom, but, we all understand it's not always about book smarts. It's, about a bigger, deeper understanding. And I was like, that is crazy. And to answer your question, no, I don't remember being super intuitive as a kid, but evidently, according to my mom, I was. And I had a very normal childhood, no crazy traumas. Mom and dad were still married, and so all that crazy stuff. So nothing nuts in a sense, because everybody's looking. Everybody typically, not everybody, but a lot of people look for a key indicator saying, "Ooh, what was the event that triggered your mediumship?" And saying, "Hell if I know. If you can figure it out, let me know." Because it wasn't until I got back from my last deployment and then it all, everything proverbially went to hell in a handbasket, so to speak.
I was going to say, is this about your
grandmother? So when she came to visit me after deployment, right? And, and like most people saying, "Well, it's your grandma. Like, how bad is it when grandma lives or, visits?" And then I always come back and go, "Yeah, it's usually not bad, but grandma died back in the 80s. It's like, right? And it's like, but it was just at that point, I would have been more comfortable if somebody was, trying to bust in the house, an insurgent trying to run me down, something that may be physical or I could wrap my brain around. But that just wasn't the case. And it was like, who do you call when you got paranormal stuff going on? Who do you call? And, because at that point, I would consider myself a very atypical male at that point. I was in the military, so everything was, for me, was kind of sense like either it's a black or white issue, right? In a sense, saying either it's wrong or it's right, or it's tangible or it's not. And I can figure it out with regulations. If it's, if they don't issue it to you, you leave it alone. And, but when it's happening to you, and and it's not going away, when you're trying to ignore it, what do you do? And I was like, oh crap, like what seal to hell did I break? Who did I make mad? And really, quite honestly, we reached out. My wife had been going to a local psychic, and I was like, you need to get, and I was joking with her, and I said, I was calling this lady the voodoo chick. And I said, she doesn't do voodoo, by the way, but I said, you need to get that voodoo chick over here, and I don't know what's going on, but we need to figure it out. And really, she just said, well, your grandpa's here and he's giving you support after your deployment. And I wasn't really happy with her answer because I just wanted her to basically make it all go away. And I didn't understand how it worked. And so I thought, oh my God, this lady is smoking her own sage. Like, just how much are we paying her, right? And really, it wasn't about making things go away. It was more about me stepping into my abilities and, you know, trying to figure out who it was and who Dean McMurray really was, because up until this point, I was self-identifying as, you know, a soldier. If you would have asked me who I was going back 10 years ago, I would have told you I'm a, you know, a soldier, a husband, and a dad, and a son, you know. So, but I understand that those are labels now, but, and, you know, you're much more than that. But I was identifying so much. So really, it was a almost kind of like an identity crisis in a sense, but I was in my early 40s, and I
was gonna say, like, how did the kids?
You know, it was really crazy. My son was a newborn. He was our deployment baby, and and our daughter was about 5 at the time, and she was our daughter's still super intuitive. And what I would share is that the crazy thing is that when I would try to ignore spirits and everything else going on, my daughter would come in, not wake my wife, which would be very normal. You know, kids typically go to mom.
Yeah.
But they would come to me. And if you've never, for maybe those listening, if you've never had anything creepy, have your 5-year-old daughter come in at 2:00 in the morning going, Daddy, there's a man in my room. I mean, oh my God, right? So the dad sirens go off like a million miles an hour, and you're flying into the bedroom. And it's like, and of course there's nobody physically there. And then I'm like, oh, like I'm still trying to get it, right? And I'm like, and then you're kind of creeped out, like what guy? You know, it's like you're trying to figure it out.
Yes.
But yet at the same time, it's like you know, all these conjuring up these images of old shows, like they're here, you know, and so it was more about, I realized very quickly that if I didn't deal with it, my kids would be bugged. And so I was like, you know, as a dad, and as somebody that just wanted some peace, really, I was like, fine, you know, and it's like, you know, and it's like, okay, I come talk to me then. And so I really set some boundaries with spirit, and I was trying to figure out what it all meant. And well, you know, I was like, do you push a button and all of a sudden the messages come? And, you know, like, what do I do? And like, you know, do I run out and get a t-shirt that says, hi, I'm a medium? I was joking the whole time. And I was like, what does this mean for Dean McMurray? Does this mean that I'm gonna, and I stupidly joked around with it, saying, ooh, what does this mean? I'm going to be giving readings now in my basement? Somebody was going, yeah, you will, like, and in Ubers and in boats and in, you know, anywhere and everywhere you'll be giving readings, Dean.
Have you done a great reading?
Yeah, so it was crazy. I had just signed with.
That's what yeah. How do you get something substantial? Like, are you leaving people crying?
Well,
that's what I'm wondering.
It was crazy. I had just signed with an agent, and it was and I was pretty pumped. And he was, this is Minneapolis, and because he was like, and it was right Super Bowl week. And crazy enough, the agent that I had at the time, he had some athletes on his roster as well, and he was like, "You need to get down to Minneapolis, which is a 3-hour drive for me, and you need to come down here, and I need to do some networking for you, and so you can meet some folks." And I was like, "Sweet," and so of course I'm down there, and of course, taking an Uber from the hotel to this event, it was basically a all-inclusive hate is wrong party, gay, lesbian, everybody. It was a really cool event. It was really awesome. And yeah, it was just off the hook. And so the cool thing is that, so I'm going down there, and I'm making chit chat with the Uber driver. And of course, he always talks. I forget what country he was from. And of course, we were talking about the military stuff going on in there. And then of course, he asked what I do. And I was like, "Well, you sure you want to know? Like, do you really want?" And so I said, "I'm not kidding you." I said, "I'm really a psychic medium." And he goes, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah, really." And he was like, "Would you give me a reading?" And I was like, Are you sure? Like, we're driving. And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Okay." And so I connected to this gentleman's grandfather and grandmother. And, I started, and he goes, he's looking in the rearview mirror with tears in his eyes. And he goes, "Oh my God." And he goes, "Yeah, that's her." And and he goes, "I was raised by my going into the story about whatever country there. I guess it's bugging me that I can't remember the country, but basically, he had a hard time growing up because of the strife and the war and everything. And his grandparents really raised him because his parents died, and it was a really moving. I was almost in tears by the time we were done. I was like, "Oh my God." I was like, "I gotta go." And but yeah, it was crazy. But it was like, you always trust, and I hope that driver felt a bit lighter, like, "Hey, that was cool. I got to connect with grandpa or grandma or whomever." And so I always trust that the people that I come in contact with, um, the messages that I deliver, again, are the ones that they need to hear. And that's the cool thing, regardless of, when it gets to the monetary aspect of reading, that is regardless. It's the biggest thing is the healing that takes place. And that's the cool thing.
I was going to ask about, you opened, as per usual with my guest, you opened a lot of different curiosities inside of me. Let's see. I mean, let's take it back for a second about your grandmother, because I've, in a couple of interviews, and in your biography, like I've heard you mention that she came to visit you, and even she touched you. But the thing that isn't clear is, like, what exactly was that scene? Was she a ghost? Was it the full person? Like, how long was the exchange? Was she hanging around like a movie style haunting? Like, take us to the moment where she actually visited you.
So the whole scene, I'll paint it for you, is, talking about, it really started with me washing bottles at midnight for my son. And everybody's in bed. My son, my daughter, my wife, they're all in bed. This about midnight. And I knew somebody was there with me. Didn't know how, but all of a sudden, a knowing washed over me. And I kept on really getting a creeped out feeling in the beginning, like somebody was watching me. But I was like, I kept on turning around. Of course, I didn't see anything, but I kept on feeling somebody was with me. And I was like, "What the heck?" And I was like, "Whatever, I'm just tired." And so when I went to bed, I knew that my grandmother was with me. All of a sudden, it was just of course, I understand it as claircognizance now, But then I didn't know how I knew it was grandma, but every sense in my body was telling me, hey, it's grandma. She's here. She's not here to hurt you. And quite literally, I'm almost having a conversation with myself before I went to bed, like, it's grandma, dude. Like, she's not here to hurt you. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to go crazy. And so I went to bed. And I'm laying in bed, and I think it's really normal if anybody knows that a deceased loved one is there, whether they believe or not. I would like to believe at least that there is a small piece of them that wants to reconnect. And so you start talking to them in your head. And that's what I started doing one way. And I'm laying there with the covers over me on my side and in bed. And I had my eyes closed and was like, hey, grandma, I love you, what you been up to, all that. And then it was like my ego just popped up, and was like, you know what, Dean, this is all BS. You're tired. You know what? If she was really here, she would prove it.
Right.
Let's just prove this. And as soon as those words left my head, the room turned absolutely ice cold. And it wasn't gradual. It was immediate, like walking out in January outside in the Midwest. And I was like, holy crap, like what just happened? And I could really feel that. And then, of course, logic was trying to work its way back into the conversation and saying, you know what, the wife could have the window open, the off-peak power, right? All these different aspects of trying to paint this picture so I'd understand. And then, so basically I was like, my ego was trying to tell me, you know what, if she was really here, she would just touch us. If she would just touch us, then, it would put everything, all this speculation, to rest. And at this point, I did not see grandma. She did not manifest for me. There was no mist. Again, I still had my eyes closed, but I was still very much awake. I was still very aware of all my sensations or my senses, right? So as soon as I said that, it was an even yet gentle pressure from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet that pushed me directly into the bed. And and I could hear, remember I was saying earlier in the conversation, I was laying on my side. I could hear the springs compress. And I was like, it was like somebody was laying on me. And I was like, holy crap, like what is going on? It like freaked me out. And of course, it brought out almost like the 4-year-old little kid in me. And I was like, all right, Grandma, I love you. You got to leave. And yeah, it was too much for me to comprehend. And as soon as I said that, boom, everything disappeared, meaning the weight, the temperature and difference, everything that I was experiencing disappeared like it was never there. But I sat up completely out of breath, covered in sweat, trying to figure out what the hell just happened. And like, of course, my mind trying to conceptualize it, like saying, oh my God, am I having some type of flashback? Am I, start of some psychosis? And I'm like,
yeah,
right.
I can imagine.
And, I hadn't been drinking. I hadn't, nothing. And I was like, oh my God. And of course, I'm waking up my wife going, there's somebody here. And she's like, thinking somebody's breaking in. I said, no. I said, there's a spirit here. And she said, how do you know that? And I said, right, I don't know. And I said, you need to call Voodoo Chick right now, meaning that psychic. And she's like, Dean, it's like 2:00 in the morning. And I was like, oh God. So I got up and I think I watched TV for the rest of the night into the early morning. And, and so it was interesting. That was really what I call my awakening, because I knew, regardless of what anybody told me, anything I watched or read or anything, for me, that point in time was so visceral. I know what I experienced, and nobody can explain it away for me because it was something that I personally experienced. And so I was like, okay, why me? Why now? And, you know, the whole, I was sharing, you know, like trying to figure out, hey, what does this mean? And of course, I went back to that voodoo chick again and that psychic. And she
Yeah.
said, well, you're a medium. And I said, the hell I am. And she said, yeah, you'll figure it out. And I was like, I don't want to be a medium. Like, I'm not looking to be a medium and not, you know, didn't go look. And
Yeah.
it's like,
Right.
she said, it
Right.
doesn't work that way. And I was like, well, you know, and I was like, and she said, well, you'll figure it out. It'll come out in the wash, so to speak. And then I tried to ignore it. And, you know, I shared how that really worked out for me. It didn't. And so, you
Mhm.
know, I tried. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, well, if I am a medium, what does that mean? Like, you look up the meaning. And of course, James Van Prague, Teresa Caputo wasn't, she wasn't, you know, on TV yet, but, you know, John Edwards and James Van Prague. Yeah. You know, the
Of
old guys
course.
have been around
Yes.
for a long time, and all those, and I'm reading old books and, you know, all this and consuming. And I was like, okay, that's fine for them. But what does it mean for Dean McMurray? Like, it could be something totally different. Like, I didn't even know, like, I get what it means, but like, it's like waking up and you have an extra thumb. What are you going to do with it? Like, and so
Yeah.
I went really back to that psychic and I was really frustrated. And she said, before you meet with me, I want you to read a book. And she recommended John Edwards' book, The Infinite Quest. And it was really, I love this book because it really explained in a very down and dirty way of setting boundaries with spirits. But it really asked a great question, like, why do you want to be medium, over and over and over? And I was really confused. Like, I don't, like, you know, and I'm like, I don't. And it's like, but it's not going
Yeah.
away. And so I told her, I said, I'm more confused now than I was before I began. And she said, well, let's take time and figure it out. And so I met with her and you know, did some meditation. And it was really, the bottom line is I came to a self-realization that it was to help people, because that's why really I joined the military anyways, to be some part of something bigger than myself and to really help people. And, you know, and really this was a new vehicle, and it was interesting. Really after I started embracing, or even timidly sometimes, walking down that path of self-realization and development, um, it was like doors started opening. It was like, and then I started getting excited about it because I felt a resonance
Yeah.
within my soul, I'll call it. And it was like, oh my God, like this, you know, like you can feel it sometimes when you're aligned with something. It's just like it fires you up, right? It's like where was, you know, it's like you're coming home again. And I was like, wow, because I could never see myself doing anything other than leaving the VA, working, or sorry, leaving the military and working for the VA. That was my plan. That was, and and that wasn't to be. And I was like, you know, like I couldn't even fathom that. And I was like, okay. And as I allowed the process just to really happen, you know, you meet people, you have experiences, and you allow that to take you wherever it's going to take you. And it has some pretty cool destinations. So.
Why do I feel like I'm counseling you right now? This is it. I mean, I feel like you're like putting pieces together that maybe, I don't know. I am sort of, you know, like I
Right.
always wonder when I have people on the show, like what are the things that you wish you could explore more in an interview setting?
Right.
Like, are there topics? I mean, I know that before this, one of the things that hooked me,
Sure.
this is how
Yeah.
I really found you, Dean. Full story is I reached out to the world and I said, I want an expert on ghosts or UFOs. And
Right.
you're like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
well, I kind of do both. Um, I mean, like, well, first of all, for my listeners and really again, just for my greater understanding. Like, how do
Mhm.
you get from being a medium to
Funny
UFO?
because when I started this whole thing, I started doing the expo circuit in my region and area. And of course,
Yeah.
you have the mix because I'll call it the holistic community at these. If you've ever been to an expo like that, you have your psychic readers and rock shop folks and crystals and all that folk. But then you have the
Mm-hmm.
extraterrestrial
Right.
niche. And so whether they're talking about UFOs or aliens or whatever, and every time I went, there was about 3 or 4 of them, folks that were in that niche area. And I could just, Evan, they're nice enough. They were nice enough, but I could just not, I couldn't push that envelope to believe that. And I was like, and then it was funny. I had a realization, I think, and it was like almost like the universe tapped. It was like, Dean, do you remember you talked to dead people? And it was like, Dean, do you remember back when you couldn't believe that people talk to dead people? And it was like, so, and I was like, oh, you saying to
Right.
be open? Like, oh, all right. And so, but I couldn't quite go
Yes.
there. And I was like, and so I was like, you know what? That's okay. I'm just going to, give it space and, listen and, if observe. And I was like, I found it fascinating, but I was like, I just can't quite go there. Fast forward some time. I was, by this time I had been doing a lot of house cleansings or dousings, right? By locating and shifting energy within the home. And then, of course, a lot of what people would say is earthbound souls sometimes gets trapped to homes and they have hauntings or whatever as you'd like to call it. I had a gentleman call me and in my area, and he said, "You're the dude that does cleanse or gets rid of ghosts and stuff, right?" I'm like, yeah. And he was like,
Yeah.
well, I got some stuff going on. He goes, I need you to come over to my place. And I was like, so we set a time and date. I come over to do the cleansing. And it's interesting. I got to paint you a little picture. So imagine a gentleman in his early 60s, tall, very average looking, prior service, ex-Marine Corps, just like a guy's guy, right? Dressed in flannel, kind of like the bounty guy on the paper towel, right? And he was like,
Right.
I didn't really believe in all this mumbo jumbo paranormal stuff, but he goes, and then he said a couple swear words, whatever, and he goes, but I got some people in, and he goes, when I go to bed, he goes, I know there's a little girl that plays on the bed, and he goes, I can hear her. And he goes, there's some other stuff going on. And I was like, okay, there's a lot of crazy, I've been kind of introduced to some crazy stuff by this time. And I was like, okay, well, let's just see what we get. We'll cleanse your space. And that's what I did. I did my traditional space cleansing, I'll call it, or dousing. And there was some heavy stuff that came up,
Right.
meaning some negative, more than I would say. A lot of people would say like almost like a evil entity or something, but I call it a negative energy, right? And I was like, ooh, there's some heavy energy here, but I was like, I feel that it's going to clear up pretty quick. And mixed in with all the other paranormal activity. And so we did that, and I actually ended up giving him a reading. And the crazy thing about it was I connected to a friend of his that committed suicide. And I said, and it was really crazy because it was multi-layered, and we'll get into the extraterrestrial aspect here in a second. But I said, he's showing me a forearm like tattoo, almost looks like a horseshoe or a U or something. And he goes, maybe like this. And I kid you not, it was a bruise in the shape of a U. And I was like, oh, you gotta be freaking kidding me, right? And I was like, check that out.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa. I said, I've never seen that before. And he goes, yeah, that wasn't there before. That's a bruise. And I was like, that looks like, a bad prison tattoo underneath the skin. And it was just crazy. And I was like, well, I'm going to go ahead. And I did the reading, but then I said, I'm really going to do a good, a very good cleansing and a blessing, and we'll get your space straight. And then if I need to come back, I'll do it for free. And so I did that. And, and every time I do a cleansing, I always ask, because I work a lot with archangels and other divine helpers, saying, hey, are we good to go? Is this space? Is there anything that I may have forgotten? And I got, nope, you got everything. And I was also using dowsing rods. If you're not familiar with they're like an L-shaped rod with a handle on it. Yeah. And so I was getting
right.
Yeah. And you can use it for cleansing space as well. And it's really just a tool for, messaging or directing. And I just got that, hey, you're good to go. And I was like, all right. So I said, hey, give it about 3-4 days. Let me know. And I said, if I need to come back, I will. Like I said, if we need to shift it up. He called me within 24 hours. He said, it's getting worse. It jumps on me now when I go to work. And he goes, it's like a dark, the energy almost turned dark in a sense. And I was like, this is weird. So I went back as promised and kind of really did more of a traditional Christian, cleansing, almost a level of exorcism type deal, and all that. But I was really bringing in a lot of arcane, and normally I've never ever had any problems. And when I was doing this, I kept on, it was almost when I started connecting to this dark mass or energy, I noticed right away it was different than anything else. And I was like, well, just there's all kinds of different entities out there. And I was like, it's just negative. And I was like, I don't care what it is. It just needs to leave him and, be transmuted. And so, it's kind of the old adage, you get to the light and bring in, all the light and everything. And I think we even had some holy water and other things and just kind of all kinds of craziness. And it wasn't going away. It was like it was almost laughing at us in a sense. And this guy was having problems because a little background on him. He had open heart surgery, maybe 4 years prior to this event, right? And he was kind of worried that it was trying to hurt him, stress him to the point where he had another heart attack. And I said, and we were talking on the phone one evening, I said, if you feel that you're in danger, I said, you need to go to the doctor and get checked. And I said, so, to make sure your heart's okay. And what he did, and there was, and I knew the scans would come back good. And I was like, I knew it was all energy. And so when he did this, I was really scratching my head. And I said, give me a day or two. I said, I know that you're kind of in crisis mode, but I said, I said, there's something different about this. And I said, I want to make sure that we're tying up all the loose ends. And so I reached out to several friends that some mentors and teachers that I had met by this time. And, right away they started, this is extraterrestrial nature. And I was like, oh, here we go. Remember, I was saying that I wasn't really a big believer in it. And I was like, what? And they were like, yeah, this is extraterrestrial. This is like some heavy energy, and more so than what I've typically felt. And you might be dealing with some reptilian energy. That's what it feels like anyways, trying to narrow it down. And there was some that were, I did have one friend, the previous teacher, that was trying to tell me, bring in it was more of along the Christian, if you think of like Saint Germain and some other big spiritual energies. And I said, no, 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 no. You don't understand. That stuff doesn't work. That hasn't been, you don't get that. And she's like, no, 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 that'll work. And I was like, no, I've already
Yeah.
tried that. So I reached out to a bunch of people in my network, and finally it came down to actually one older lady that I don't talk to a lot. And she goes, why don't you give me a call? And I called her and I said, hi. I said, what's up? And I told her exactly and she goes, in all the years, she goes, I've had one person that had that issue. And she said, for that person, she said they were dealing with a reptilian entity. And she said that had, in a sense, for lack of better words, inhabited their body. And it was kind of a possession type thing. And I said, so, okay, the crowd wants to know, like, what did you do? How'd you get rid of it? And she said, there's a couple things. She told me about a person I want to say in Florida that deals with Arcturians. I had never heard of Arcturians, the emissaries of light, this race of, divine entities or beings.
Yes.
And I was like, oh Lord, here we go, further down the rabbit hole. And I was like, but by this time I was really at a loss. So, and she said, there's another way too. And she said, but it's longer. She said, because basically what it is it feeds off fear, and it's almost like reoccurring. It gets them in a cycle. And, when somebody steps into their own abilities or their own power, that, then it has less connection to the soul. And so I was like, wow, there's got to be something and so I actually reached out to this gentleman, and he made it very clear to me that he was the only one, and in his words, the only one of our race at this time that is allowed to work for the Arcturians. And red flags went up right away. I was like, well, if these Arcturians are real, that sounds like BS to me. I'm sorry. Nothing against the guy, but I was like, why aren't I special? Why can't I work with them? Like, it's like, can I be part of the union? It's like these guys, so I started doing a lot of research. And of course I understand out on the internet, you got to take it with a grain of salt. But I learned a lot, and I was like, okay. So, I was like, they're kind of like the archangels of the galactic realm. And I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. And I was like, so I said, we can do one of few things. I said, we can turn you over to this guy in Florida, and you can pay for sessions there. And I don't know, I said his rates or anything, but so anyways, but I said, I would like to try something if you're, open to it. And I said, where I would like to invite or, try to connect to the, I explained to him who the Arcturians were, but I said, first I want to try something. And a mentor of mine told me to figure out exactly who you're working with. Make sure you look him in the eyes, your client. And I said, why? And they were like, oh, he said, you'll know. And I actually felt really guided to buy a pair of tuning forks. I don't know why. And they had a certain DNA resonance. I forget the actual frequency. And so I felt really guided to activate the tuning forks and actually put them on either side of his head. And when I did that, it was like it almost disrupted for a second or two we'll just say the facade in a sense. And I actually saw reptilian eyes, and I actually sat back and I was like, holy shit. I was like, wow, like completely blown away and really freaked out. And I was like, there's really something in there. Like I could really see it. And I was like, oh my God, like, what do you do? Like, it's like finding the mouse. It's like, okay, we're going to trap this snake, and oh my God, we got
Yeah.
the snake. Now what? And so, but then it was like, okay, now we know what we're dealing with. But it was really about getting the client, to get to a place of resonance that, saying, we're going to find a resolution to this, and to start working with the Arcturians. Long story short, we got him the help that he needed, and he got the reptilian removed and entity removed. And subsequent years, I've dealt with some, like, you think of like implant stuff. You talk about alien implants and those things. There's been some of that stuff spring up.
Yeah, that's like Whitley Schreiber or whatever. He's I mean, there's some people out there that really think that they have like a lifelong
there's some crazy stuff that it's crazy to me, because it's just, and so, like I said, it was kind of out of the frying pan into the fire, and it was like, holy crap, I went from not believing in that stuff to having this first, in-person experience with this guy, having this reptilian entity within him. And it was like, trying to help him, remove it. And it was like, holy crap, so it's been really interesting. There has been a few. I don't really get into, because I know there's nuances within that realm. And I'll be the first to admit, I am not the expert when it comes to it. And I may misspeak as far as terms or whatever, but I know what I've experienced and what I've seen. And it's been, I could say that there's a lot of things that we still don't understand. There's a whole big world out there that is never ending. So it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, like, what do you imagine that you haven't encountered yet that you might?
What?
Like, do you think you're going to get fairies?
No, I don't.
Like Bigfoot?
Yeah.
Like, what are
No,
you looking? Do you
Yeah,
have
well,
any of
you know
that
what's
stuff?
interesting?
You're like, I want
I
to see this.
anybody that's been to some of my galleries, I haven't like in person experienced a fairy, but like I know that I've given people readings, and for whatever reason, I said, "Oh my God, you have a fairy type of energy," meaning like very like everywhere, and like like you think of a bumblebee, right? Is very busy and everywhere. But for some reason, and they would come up to me after the gallery and go, "Yeah, I'm really connected to fairies and their energy, and and the whole aspect." And I have no experience with fairies. I have no experience with Sasquatch and all that cryptozoology and all that stuff. I have no experience in that, but I think it's fascinating. And, maybe down the road to go on.
Yeah, I mean, did you ever imagine when you were
hey
training
guys, let's
in the military
let's grab
that
the
you
rifles.
ever-
Let's go out and hump
any
the
of
no, it's like no, right. No,
That's what I'm thinking
as far
here.
as there's so many legends too, right? So like there's people that believe in the legend of like the Loch Ness and leprechauns, and I'm not saying that it doesn't exist, because saying that I was a long believer that I don't know if I can believe about the UFO stuff, and then you have your experience, because I know that here I am talking to dead people, and it's like, really, Dean, and so and it really brings me back to a point of people that are skeptics, and whether they're listening to this episode or not, I really respect people that are skeptical, because I believe it's healthy to have a good dose of skepticism, because it makes you vet out the actual truth from the untruth. And because there's a lot out there, right? And it's so prevalent nowadays. And so I was very much a skeptic and sometimes still am. And I think it's good to have a piece. There's a difference now between being skeptical and cynical. You'll never change a cynic's mind, and no sense even having
Yes.
a argument with them, because but I always come from the standpoint of I'm not here to try to prove anything to anyone, and I'm just having my living my experience and then helping people that come to me for help. And so it's like I don't go around and going, you gotta
Yeah.
believe, it's like, how can you not be a believer? I don't do that, because when I was in that space of not believing, I was a not, I'd be like, well, go smoke your sage or whatever you guys do. That's what I would have said to me, because that's the headspace that I
Yeah.
was in. And I've come to understand that's okay. That's okay to be in that space. And, it's not about, making somebody a believer.
Yeah.
So.
Do you think, like,
Yeah.
to circle back to being a military medium, one of the things that is intriguing to me about that title and the idea that you've opened yourself up
Yeah.
to having more opportunities to
Right.
speak to people, or at least you've opened up
Right.
the world to people that would speak to you that normally wouldn't. Do you think, like, that informs your understanding of what it actually means to train soldiers? And here's what I mean. My understanding of it is it's very much like you are getting, I mean, this is why,
Sure.
in my trainings as a hypnotist, I have always been told that military
Mm.
people are the best hypnotic subjects. The best. So easy. The stereotype is that, like, you couldn't get someone into suggestion who's, like, staunch and resisting, but
Mm-hmm.
because military people take orders so well, because they respond, it's really like a conditioning of the mind that you're often going through in addition to the body.
Right.
And of course, conditioning the body, like, really strengthens the mental conditioning too. They become more open to
Right.
just, like, following orders, following instructions, going the trance.
Yeah.
Here's my question then, with regards to, like, the spiritual stuff. In my understanding, it seems that there's definitely, like, you're trained to fight. You got to go out there. You got to be strong. You need strength. There's kind of like a more of a, like a, almost like a
Yeah.
hard, like, boom, masculine, like,
Right.
energy. And then it's like you go to a psychic fair and it's like, like, you imagine, like,
Yeah.
a lot of these people would be like, make love, not war, man. Like, do you think, like, how do you deal with the fact that, like, you're talking to a lot of people that come from that, like, combat conditioning? And then B, like, do you think training in the military in making soldiers could be a little more spiritual? Could they use a little more of that?
Yes, and yes.
And even be more effective
I would share with you
fighters?
this. First off, my background in the military, 14 and a half years of that was all ground infantry. So infantry meaning, you're leading groups of men, now women, since I've been out, God bless them. They've changed rules in combat arms, but basically you're going out to do ground combat in either urban or whatever environment, right? And then about 6 of those years, I was actually a paratrooper as well. So, so we used to jump out of aircraft as well. So it was more of a, in the days that I was in, at least,
Wow.
it was more of an alpha male bravado. And you're exactly right, because even it was really bad, like almost any weakness that was shown, they would turn on each other and eat them their own, in a sense. And I know that sounds bad, but you don't want to show any weakness. It was almost like, you think of a wolf pack, right? And so, you always have the alpha males and, the alpha dog and all that. And so kind of the hierarchy when I was in was very similar. And so either you had to adapt, you pretty much had to adapt to survive. And so the thing that I would share is that when I started, I guess, stepping into my spirituality, it was a really culture shock, because here I was in this mindset. And of course, I was changing too, because, I don't know if you have kids or not, Greg, but but the thing is, it's really interesting that it seemed like once I started having kids, it changed my outlook on things a little bit, right? It was more, from getting married to, it changes slowly.
Yeah.
And so it was, for more. So the thing that I would share, though, is, you're right. It's more love and light, and let's merge our chakras, and, it's like all that. So, there is a big chasm in a sense, but I think people can still be a warrior in a sense and not be violent. But I'm going to say there's a caveat there, is violence needs to be reserved to times of last resort. So almost you think of, I love the aspect of Buddhists and the Taoists, right? And so they train as, warriors. You think of Buddhist monks, right? Very peaceful existence, but they still train to defend. And, it was all about love and forgiveness. But yet at the same time, it's like the take no crap, but at the same time, you love everyone. And so the thing that I would share is that there's still that aspect of still being, hey, if that comes to it, which we hope that it doesn't, that's way off in the back now, where it gets pushed in the back storage rooms as far as if it needs to come to some type of conflict. However, the thing that I would share is that, do I believe that soldiers on all levels would be even more effective if they learn to develop their intuition? You bet. If you could have, you just think about it. If you could have, a typical infantry battalion is between 500-600 individuals, right? Soldiers. And so depending on the unit.
Yeah.
And if you could enhance at all variance levels, because everybody's at different levels, if you could enhance their ability, their extra sensory abilities, to be able to, say you're doing urban combat. So if you close your eyes and pretend that you're a soldier in urban combat, and you're part of a 4 to 8 man group going in to clear this building of maybe enemy insurgents. If you could go in and feel and sense before you went into a room, and saying, do I feel or can I sense anything? And understand there's a lot of stuff going on, but at the same time, if that could give you an edge, wouldn't you want it? If you could sense that there's an IED or somebody's going to do harm, wouldn't you want that? So it's almost like, in a sense, I know a lot of people say, well, oh my God, it sounds like you're talking about a Marvel comic or something. In a sense, Hollywood tends, or, the media tends to put it in that, light. But in a sense, yes, because it's an ability that not everybody enhances all the time. We all have it, but not everybody is using it or is aware of it. And it was interesting. I got to do an interview with a gentleman, former Delta Force Army Ranger, right? Has extensive military background of kicking in doors and just being an American badass, right? And one of the things, he's huge into metaphysics now. He's huge into, and he still trains law enforcement and all that. And he is totally into, hey, tap into that inner wisdom, that intuition, and allow and harness that ability. And so he's one person. I guess I'm just trying to think of people that are, you think of the military-esque description and saying, if somebody could use that and be like a super soldier in a sense, and saying, yeah, they could. And the people, again, when we go back to projects like, Operation Stargate and all these special operations projects and all that, they were tapping into a lot of extra special stuff. But what happens if you had 500 to 600 people, just a mere battalion of folks, or maybe even a platoon, which is, we're talking maybe 20, 30 folks, and that are super intuitive or whatever it is. Wouldn't that be cool? Like, or even with healers, even like energy healers, to help ease the pain of somebody that's wounded. Like, so, say you're a medic in the military and, they taught energy healing as well. If there could be something out there accentuates what you're doing. Now take that and take away the military, but you still have that ability. Wouldn't it be cool? Because they're already doing it in hospitals today. They're already, there's hospitals across the country that are bringing in people that do Reiki. There's people that do hands-on healing. So people are getting more progressive. Things are becoming more, how do I want to say, accepted on the mainstream. But I really believe that regardless of what you do, whether you're a soldier, you're a policeman, fireman, ditch digger, what you put the label, but allow it to morph to your, situation, your surroundings, and, accentuate what you do. So yeah, do I believe that it would, without a doubt, and it wouldn't cost a lot of money. It doesn't cost any money. And that's a crazy thing. So yeah.
I was gonna say the other scene
Right.
is like combat conditioning, like people at psychic expos.
Right.
And giving them weapons. Like, let's give the psychics weapons. Maybe that's maybe we need a little bit, maybe the exchange has to happen. Maybe there's a little, I don't know. I think everybody could use both sides of it, a little bit more planning for like the more flighty people like me. And then like for the planning, the diligent people, like maybe calling into higher consciousness, like bringing those worlds together. I definitely think you do it well. And then you've got your show, the Red, White, and You Show, which is a podcast that focuses on the military and veterans and whatnot, firefighters, first responders. On this show,
oh no, it's
are you like an
so
undercover medium, or is
it's out there? But the thing is that so really what the Red, White, New Show is here's really how it started. It started here in my local area, and I was really on, I was a reoccurring guest on a rock show. And it was really fun because I was doing readings for rock bands and everything. Right. And, other celebs, and the station manager and of course the show host was like, dude, you should have your own show. And I was like, you guys are crazy. Like, I don't have a background in radio. I don't even know what I would do. Like, I couldn't imagine doing an hour of just talking about readings. I thought people like every week,
Right.
And so I can see maybe once or twice a month, but if it was readings, well, the original idea I thought about it, and and they made me an offer. It was one of those, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. Right. And so I was like, I couldn't turn it down. In a sense of the aspect of I was like, God, I can't even, advertising is crazy. And I was like, God, this is a great way, not only to get my name out there, but I was like, but this is a great way to help people. And that's really the idea behind it. And so I was like, what the hell am I going to talk about? And so it just came to me, why don't you talk about what you know? Why don't you talk about the military? But I was like, okay, well, it's not going to be, you got to pick a theme. And I was like, well, why don't you have people on that are doing great things for, the military veterans or families and first responders? And there's all kinds of do-gooders out there. And if there's a veteran out there or a military person that listens and is struggling, and hopefully it is something informative where they can get help, right? And so that was the premise. And so it started on, local radio. And then, we switched over to a podcast. And that's been really fun. And so, yeah, we just have fun with it. And and I don't see, it's interesting because it's always, they're a white news show with the military medium. Well, I don't do readings on the air. And because anybody, I had a celebrity lined up, and they were like, yeah, we can't do that. They didn't want, because they looked up who I was, is what it was. And they were worried. And I had, trying to send them an email going, I won't be doing any readings. I don't do any psychic stuff. And yeah, that didn't. So anyways, but I was like, hey, that's cool. So whatever. But yeah, so I don't do the psychic thing. It's like my way of giving back. And, it's really taken on a life of its own. And I kind of like that it's separate. It's separate from the aspect, but I have had other mediums. I've had other healers. We talked about military trauma and that kind of stuff. And then, around Halloween, we brought on, of course, we talk about we've talked about the paranormal and all that great fun stuff, which is always near and dear to my heart. But yeah, we got to do that. But yeah, so it's been really fun, and I enjoy doing that. But yeah. Oh yeah.
Am I gonna turn out okay?
He's like, really?
Really? Is that what you're removing? Yeah. Well, how does it come to you? Like, how does it when you're with someone? Like, I didn't necessarily ask you for like a formal reading, but like, do you like sense like someone's future without even them knowing? Like when it comes to, even with me right now, like at what point in our conversation?
So that's the difference with me.
Greg's past.
Is I don't reread anybody unless they're coming to me initially. Say if we set up something, and maybe in a previous conversation he said, oh, that would be really cool if on the air that you gave me a reading, Dean. And so that right away gives me permission to read you.
Yeah.
And that is so huge with me, because part of my ethics, not only growing up, right?
Yeah.
But also as a medium, as an energy worker, I always ask permission. If I'm doing any readings, any clearings, anything like that, even remotely, I have to ask permission. And if I get a no, then I can't do it, regardless if it's frustrating or not. And so if I came up to somebody, and maybe I was there's been few and, not really a lot of times where I've gotten some just by passing, but there's been a few times. But if I go up to that individual, if they go, get away from me, freak, they haven't done that, thank God. But if they did that, or saying, no, I don't feel comfortable, then, it's not like I'm going to, oh, you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Or I just don't come up to somebody and start reading, because here's my thought process is your energy is very intimate space. And I do not violate that, because number one, I wouldn't want somebody to violate that for me. And where I've had other readers come up to me and start, oh my God, like maybe at a fair or whatever. And I've had a little discussion with them saying, I appreciate that, but I never gave you permission to read me. And that's a violation of my ethics. And And that really kind of sets them back on their feet, because
Oh wow.
saying, if I want a reading, I'll come to you for a reading. It's not going to stop me. I'm not scared to go get a reading. And so, but some people feel that that's okay. And I think because of TV and media is so heavily edited, we don't see the ask part. We don't see the, how do I want to say, the things that aren't so pretty, as far as like the, hey, walk up to somebody and say, for example, one that's really, when they were doing Long Island Medium, everybody talked about where she would walk up to somebody and just start reading them, right? And, saying, do you do that? And saying, well, I know, and I know a few other
Yeah.
people know that they have to sign a release, right? And to air on national TV. They have to. It's law.
Of course.
And
it's television.
so but they don't see that part, because that doesn't make good TV. And they just want to see the drama, the part where they connect with their, I don't know, their infant son, or their deceased mother, or their brother that got, committed suicide, whatever it is. And, and to connect this story. But they don't want to, the part where they have to go and ask, and the administrative aspect, it's boring. And that's the part that people don't realize. There's so much editing. I was involved in a little project when it came to film, and they came and shot some film, and by the time it was like, I was told, don't worry about it, we can edit it to make it look like anything that we want. And it really set me back, because I was like, really? Like, they can make it look, and sure enough, by zooming in or out, or different cues with music and everything else, they can set a different tone with it, make it look like, something happened that didn't, or whatever. And it's just like, wow, like, completely blew my mind, because I'm really ignorant when it comes to that. I don't come from that world. And it really educated me, like, wow, there's so much more that we don't see. And I was like, But one of the things I got to share is, when we were doing it, I made sure to tell the producer, because they were doing the filming readings. And I said, this is not going to be bullshit. Sorry, but that was the words that I used. And I said, because I want them to be real. I said, because I can't fake the funk. And I said, I can't fake it. Like, if I know something, like, it's going to come off fakey, and I don't want to do that. That's not me. I said, I don't want to know, like, I might know their name. And of course, so I said, I want to know next to nothing about this person. I don't want to know their background. I said, because then I question myself, do I know this because I was told, or do I know this because, I'm receiving this from spirit? And so, and that's a big thing, bringing, when I do readings, or anybody else out there getting a reading from any other medium or psychic, don't feed people. Like, don't feed the medium. Don't feed, it sounds like a zoo. It's like, but don't, there's so many times where I've had people come in that are so nervous, and then they're chatty Cathy, right? And there was one lady, I was like, well, you might as well leave now. And she was like, well, we haven't even started. And I said, you just went on to talk about how, all about your background and da da da. And I said, I appreciate that you're nervous, but I said, we can still do it. But I said, it's going to be really hard, because now you just given me all this information. And I said, instead of, hey, maybe you're just your name. Some readers, I understand, require like their birth date or whatever, but it's very minimal. It shouldn't ask for, can you resonate with this? Does this make sense to you? So yeah, but for me personally, speaking for me personally, I do not like pre-knowledge. It's just it's bad juju. It's yeah. So.
So wait, when you say I'm gonna be okay,
right? It's like,
what were
yeah,
you
you'll be all right.
speaking
You'll
to?
be all right.
Was that the
No.
counselor?
No, I feel that really, Greg, is, I mean, if you're earnestly asking me, really asking me, like, looking 6 months to a year down the road, of course, we all understand that future of, oh, okay, thank you. But yeah,
Please.
I
I'll
feel,
give you permission.
as far as what the energies align, I don't know what you got going on in April, but there's a lot of anxiety around April, May timeframe. It's like you can't come here quick enough, right? And it's like my heart starts fluttering around that date. And it's like, okay, I get it. The whole COVID anniversaries around there when we all got shut down. But I was like, there's more to it. It's almost like if it's a reunited with somebody, or maybe it's somebody that reconnection. I don't know. But yeah, so new relationships as well. But yeah, it feels like you're doing pretty good this, talking about the next 6 months to a year. So does that make sense? Kind of like really anticipating that March, April timeframe.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been quarantined in Massachusetts for a while. I normally am out of New York, and I do wonder about, like, I feel like when I'm gonna be going back, which I imagine is closer to the winter, that's going to be the beginning of building.
Well, to be really honest, I think
back
even a blind psychic could tell you that, if everybody's probably wondering, like, when this COVID stuff is going to be over, like Dean, and to be really honest, in the beginning, I wasn't connecting to any of it because, quite honestly, I was feeling really bummed every time I connected to the energy, the global energy, because just everybody's stuff, not only political, but because of COVID. And so I was really staying out of it. I was just doing my thing and kind of keeping my head down. And hey, I got my family over here. We're doing, I'm doing work, but and just kind of keeping quiet. And then finally, my wife had asked me several times, and I was like, quite honestly, I'm not connecting because I feel like it's almost really hard for me to pull out of that energy. It just feels so heavy. And then one day it was just like, an inner voice, one of my guides in a sense, said, you know what, we can show you without you getting into it. And where started connecting to all that, and so kind of getting a timeline, if you will, and of stuff going forward. So but really after the election, is we're going to start seeing a turn with the whole COVID thing. So it's going to be interesting. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is
yeah.
people?
It's interesting because
going to win the election.
I did. We did a 20.
Do you ever
2020 prediction? Somebody asked me on somebody else's show to do it, and we talked about the election because we knew that it was an election year, and originally, when I was reading the energy, I was like, oh, yeah, Trump at that point, President Trump was on his way out. It's interesting because I keep on getting something in the background to almost feel like it's to try to ensure a firm footing to try to save face or save grace. So I don't know. I think it's anybody's guess right at this point. By the end of October, I think maybe the first, by the end of October. But it's just kind of crazy right now so it's going to be interesting for sure. There's going to be a lot of endings of cycles, though, after this election. But if some outside forces intervene, it could really be. I think it's just going to be interesting, is all. So. Well, I just think there's some hidden agenda. This is what I feel. I feel that there's some hidden agendas, and I think a lot of people would concur with me that where I've been feeling for quite some time that, where I feel that, a lot of these public figures, we'll call them, are really just mere puppets. And so, right. And so there's a bigger agenda at play. And, as they go forward, it's like, has that agenda changed? What's going on because of the geopolitical climate? Has their, what's their target now? What do they want to do? And I'm a big firm believer in saying that the whole, I know there's conspiracies out there, out the yin yang about COVID, but I'm a huge believer in that it was a something that was man-made specifically to disrupt and, change up the whole thing. But I really believe that it got a little bit bigger than what they actually planned, and it morphed in a sense. But it's still, at the end of the day, has the same effect that they wanted to disrupt and just change things up. So so I kind of look at things too. It's what's going on from a military aspect. It's like, if a bad guy wanted to do something, like, could that be, but then I intuitively and psychically tune into it and then read the energy. And it's like, no, that's kind of BS. And it's like,
is QAnon a real military operation?
So
tell us
fill
the
me
truth
on
right
QAnon.
now. I want the scoop on this show, Dean.
Oh, you mean the Q? So as far as the big world order,
oh my gosh! I mean,
the one that controls.
Yeah, the Q movement. Yeah, the idea that there's a military operation
underground
going on
is that
Trump's
the one?
Camp that is,
and then also like putting people in jail, like Ellen, and
the military
all this.
The
here's the thing: I asked somebody about that too. That was that was very heavily involved with the White House Security Council and law enforcement, and he was actually a big whistleblower. And I asked him the validity of that. Like, is that kind of a real deal? Like, inquiring minds want to know. And he didn't know because he hadn't checked it out. But I think it's taken on a life of its own. I think there's what I feel. I haven't done any viewing or anything. I think there's an aspect of that that's true. I think there's a lot of it, just like anything, that there's a lot of mistruth, and where they're really where it's kind of taken on in a sense, again, a life of its own, but it's through misinformation, which is a great tool in itself, and where they're spinning it in a certain way that, it's like getting people up in arms.
Yeah.
Oh my God, now Oprah's in on it. And, do I know that that's a fact, as far as people, scaring children to the point where they, produce this stuff. Yeah. And all that. And then they,
adrenochrome or whatever.
There is some messed up stuff,
celebrities
and and if it comes out true, I guess there's an aspect of me that goes, I guess I don't really. There's a part of me that be like, I know that there's some really evil stuff in this world. I really know that, and there's the concept of evil that some people understand what's evil, and then some other stuff that's out there. There's some really deep, nasty stuff that would turn your stomach. And it's like, so does evil exist? Yes. Does that specific stuff? I don't know that. And I can't, and I haven't really, to be really honest, I haven't felt any like truth or like denial or lie behind it. So it's like, part of me intuitively is like, I believe that there's slivers of truth within that. So then that makes me concerned. So if I'm like, if there's some of this that is true,
Yes.
then it's like, oh my God, even if some of it is true, that's just disturbing in itself. And I was like, it doesn't matter what it is because it's all very sickening. And I was like, oh my God, like, so, so I guess I can't answer that with 100% certainty because I haven't vetted that one out. I haven't done any viewing. I haven't tuned in or anything, but my guides always tell me this, and spirit world always tells me this, is that always just be aware what's going on, and things are coexisting all the time. Things are happening that we have no awareness of, that are happening in the shadows, but the thing is to stay aware of your surroundings and stay in a sense of your intuitive abilities. And I think about that too as kind of a segue into, you talk about all this evil, and a lot of people would go screaming in fear. And the first thing I would say is, don't go to the fear side. Go, here's a great weapon that can combat that, and say, why don't you develop your intuition? So your spidey senses, in a sense, if you feel something is off about an individual, say maybe for those that have, so since we're talking about kids, those parents out there, maybe it's a child care provider. Maybe it's a family member. Maybe it's, so don't ignore your spidey senses, your intuition, your inner knowing. If something's off, honor it. It doesn't mean, and I always joke and I say, well, it doesn't always mean that they're an axe murderer either. It just means that for whatever reason, you are not aligned with their energy. And let me just say that again. You are not aligned with their energy. So something's off. And it could be that their dog just died. It could be that their home just got foreclosed on. Whatever the case is, their energy is off. And that's all you need to know. And you need to move out. It's like, and a lot of people get wrapped up in but they're friends, and, or here's a great one that when we're dating, right? But he or she is really cute, or they have such nice personality, or they drive us, and so we get caught up in the things, or what we see on the outside, but we're not honoring the intuitiveness that is around. And I always think, I go back to my daughter, who is now a teenager, and I was thinking, Dad can't always be there, and I can't always protect her. But I was like, what I can do? I was like, I can teach her how to honor and use her intuition. And it's better than, I get it. Some people would, teach their kids how to do hand-to-hand or shoot a pistol. But what's something that she will never forget at home? She can't lose it. It's part of her intuition. It's with her every second of every day. So if you learn how to use it and hone it, and listen to it, she'll be just fine, because then she won't put herself in that situation. I'm trusting that, because we all, made silly mistakes and went to that party, or, maybe got a ride from a friend while they were drinking, or whatever the case is, put themselves in potential harm's way, and saying, if it doesn't feel right, then trusting her intuition and be like, something doesn't feel right. We're not going to do that. I'm going to do something else.
You know what? This is amazing. You've really given me a lot of time, and I'm very grateful, Dean. Is there anybody we can trust in America? Is there one leader, if in all
Right.
your with using all your
Right.
spidey senses, it seems like you can't trust but any side of the political parties. Celebrities might or might not be involved
Ooh.
in evil things. Is there one public
Well,
figure
you
that
know,
you can
I really
sense
hate putting
intuitively
labels on
is actually a
anybody
good soul?
because that almost sounds like, you know, if I would be like, you know, if I was to pick one individual, then it makes everybody else sound like they're condemned, you know, and it's like, and so the thing is really for me to really get a good sense of where somebody is in that moment, 9 times out
Yeah.
of 10, really shake hands or in somebody's presence. And, you know, really in a snapshot, I kind of, you know, just intuitively sometimes, I might know that just something's off with them and I don't know what it is. And usually that's, you know, my first inkling. But politics is just its own animal, right? And so regardless of what's going on, I think even if you have somebody, there's some tremendous, tremendous politicians. There
Yeah.
really are, doing some great things out there for a lot of people. But I believe, this is my personal belief, Dean's belief, that they are because the old adage saying that environment is stronger than willpower. And if they want to still stay a part of that political arena, then they're going to either, you know, make concessions. They're going to bend left or right, and you know, and either vote accordingly or whatever, right? And so then you have them making
Right.
concessions, and so you know whether it's being pressured by big business or it doesn't matter who, you know, they're being swayed by something, and it doesn't make them a bad person. It just means that then they've swayed from their original intent. Um, so you know, I still feel that there still are a lot of great politicians out there, but
Mm.
um, when it comes to that, it's like I take it with a grain of salt as well. Because I know the political arena can get so mired in a lot of things, greed, you
Yeah.
know, corruption. There's all the negative stuff, but then there's also, they always say the road to hell was paved with great intentions, and people that are doing things for great causes they have big hearts, and they're like, you know, I'm
Yes.
really I really care about these people. I'm really doing it and really, but it causes big problems down the road that they can't even fathom. And so so I'm not saying that. So I guess to be really honest, the
Wow.
ones that I've only really
Yeah.
connected with are the politicians that are dead. Um, this is kind of funny to say, but you know, like I've connected to Lincoln.
Mm.
No.
I love it.
And then talked to JFK for a
Do
little
you just
bit,
like the
and
musical Hamilton?
yeah,
Is that what
so
this is?
and this is going back several
Okay, that's
years,
fair.
and it was
Oh,
interesting because
yeah.
um, it's like because we were kind of curious, like, oh, I wonder what some of the world leaders that have now passed, what would they say? What would they say about like where we are today and what's going on? And it was interesting. It was because I hadn't really channeled information like that up until that point, and I didn't really have a background, and obviously other than what you learn in high school. But I was like, I don't really know a lot about these and these people, and yeah, it was really kind of
Yeah.
fascinating, and yeah. Oh,
That's awesome. My gosh, Dean, you've got so many talents. Look, I am at least when it comes to like you're doing dowsing, you're doing healing, you're training, you're being a good father, teaching your daughter intuition. I mean, I am very interested to see, where you go with all this stuff. For my listeners, please check out deanmcmurray.com. Also, the military medium on Facebook, as well as the Red, White, and You podcast. Gene
We
says you
didn't quite
can't
say
trust
that.
anybody without being in their presence
Yeah, I
necessarily,
know.
or remote viewing. That's not exactly
No,
what I
it's all
said.
good. It's all good.
Yeah, I know. I'm twisting your words at this
That's
point.
right. Right.
I'm not sure you trust me at this point. It's all for entertainment. It's all content. No, but I really, yeah, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate your time. Yeah, I hope that we can all like tune into our intuition more in general. I think even if you don't believe it's some higher power, any of that inner awareness.
And thank you, Greg, for
inner
having me on.
attention
You're a tremendous
just
host. I
guarantees
great
you're going to have a
questions.
fuller life.
Just a great show. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so
That was a really weird last 30 seconds of that interview. It's like everything had synced up, right, timing-wise before, and then all of a sudden at the end it's like, I made some weird joke. He was hearing it later. Do you think maybe spirits interfered? Do you think at the end that what we were talking about was so heated, was so interesting? I was asking about the election. I was asking about the most trustworthy people in America. And all of a sudden the audio had to separate apart because it was too much. The astral plane was like so offended by the nature of my questioning that like the audio got very weird, and he was complimenting my interview skills, but like it was, which I appreciate. Thank you, Dean. But then all of a sudden, like the public wasn't supposed to hear that. Like, you know what? It might be that. It could be that. But also, this internet connection has been really terrible at times here at this Closet a Minute Cape Cod recording this. So, apologies for that weirdness at the end. But I'll take the ghost explanation. Let's go with that. Seems more on brand. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, specifically, the person whose ears I'm going through right now, for listening. And you know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about you specifically. You are the listener I love and cherish. And I hope to have you all back soon. And not you all back. I mean, like, just you. Just you. Like, they're fine. But really just you. Come back. I got a special one for you next week.